Welcome back to Haunted and Historic Australia for another episode in our Criminals, Cutthroats and Convicts series. Following our stories on the A-Team of Organised Crime, in this episode we look at Mr. Sin, Abe Saffron, the King of the Cross. Abe was born Abraham Gilbert Saffron in Annandale on the 6th of October 1919. Abe was the fourth of 5 children, 2 boys and a girl, and later another girl. Abe was of Russian and Jewish descent. He did his schooling at the Annandale and Leichhardt primary schools and his secondary schooling at the selective Fort Street High School, along with Frederick Charles Paddles Anderson, who was a couple of years older than Abe, which was the first government high school, as well as being the first non-religious school in Sydney, which, being of Jewish descent, was something his parents would have wanted, not being stuck in a Christian school, which was the style at the time. Their parents, Sam Saffron and Annie Gilbert, married in 1912. They lived above Sam's Drapery store, and although this helped out, it wasn't enough during the Depression, and so he set up a black market racket selling popular clothing items like nylon stockings when there was a shortage on these items and being rationed during World War I. Abe often worked for his father and would have picked up on these sly little habits of making money illegally. Abe had a knack for making money, as most Jewish kids were brought up to embrace. He had a nice scheme going at his school where he would buy other students' old textbooks when they no longer needed them at the end of the year and clean them up only to on-sell them at a higher price to the new grade students who needed them. He also sold his father's friends cigarettes on their gaming night at the house after he bought them at a cheaper price previously. He was smart and learned early on how to make a profit. From 1934, at age 15, Abe joined his father in his drapery business, being fabric and curtains. In those days, large curtains were all the style, and many women made dresses, so it was big business to own a fabric shop with all the sewing machines and dress patterns, probably knitting products as well. Abe recommended that his father expand the business and open a second store, this one in the city. Within a year, Abe was its manager and he had 2 staff working underneath him, all before he turned 20. He even had a side hustle in men's cosmetics and ended up selling this off for a handsome amount. It is at this time that he meets American-born Hilton Granville Kincaid, who was 4 years older than Abe, who also has a shop next door to the drapery shop and sells black market items under the counter. This starts a lifelong friendship with Kincaid. Abe was already making his mark in the world, but would still attend dinner on Friday nights with the family and also attend the synagogue afterwards with them. He made his parents proud, for now. But it wasn't long before the pulls of making money took him in a dark direction. He was fined in 1938 £5 for betting, and also convicted of receiving stolen goods in 1940, which he was sentenced to 6 months hard labour but offered good behaviour bond after paying £10. Later, in 1940, Abe enlisted in the Australian Army, during which he was promoted to the rank of corporal. He was discharged in 1944, and it is believed that he served in the Merchant Navy, where his mate Kincaid was serving doing administration duties on troop ships, but also selling them cigarettes and things like that on the black market. They knew how to make money, even during wartime. while they were supposed to be doing other things. After 6 months of this, they must have earned enough money to jump off at Newcastle and start to open various hotels around the Curry Curry area, including the Station Hotel, as well as various others around the Newcastle region. It is believed that there is a woman in Kincaid's life named Evelyn, and he's married to her. I'm not 100% sure when this happened, but she is running the Station Hotel with them, and it's under her name. Abe was always trying to make more money, and he decided in Newcastle to open up his own legal bookmaking venture. But it didn't go as planned when he tried to take over a jockey club. Whether he lost interest in the whole thing or it was just too difficult, complicated and long-winded to do things legally as compared to the quick and easy cash on the black market, they both gave up Newcastle area to come back to Sydney. They'd only been up there for a year, but must have had enough money to start buying into King's Cross venues. Upon his return to Sydney, now 25, he became involved with the King's Cross nightlife and a club called the Roosevelt Club, opened in 1943, named after the well-liked US president who guided them through the war despite the fact that he was dying, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who died in 1945, just before Germany and Japan surrendered, but only just before. It was a real party club opened by Canadian-born Sammy Levi, later known as Sammy Lee. Smoking Cuban cigars and wearing flamboyant clothes, he was known as the King of the Cross, as he brought in all the international acts, fun and amusing, bringing in also the lay girls, making drag queens a wonderful addition to an already glittering mile. In 1947, Abe took over ownership of the Roosevelt Club, along with best mate Kincaid, as well as a family friend that Abe's dad Sam had sent to keep an eye on how Abe ran things, making sure that he wasn't being too spend happy with his cash. This was Mendel Bruin. The trio opening up other hotels or taking ownership of them in the area, including the West End at Balmain and the Gladstone Hotel on William Street. Sammy Lee was happy, having opened his theatre restaurant. Abe had some great ideas for these hotels, and part of the Roosevelt ownership, he brought in a floor show. His aim was to please his patrons, ensuring that they could get beer and cigarettes at his place when they couldn't find it anywhere else. Kincaid, being American, did his part, especially when greeting American servicemen, bringing them into their clubs and introducing them to the very lovely Australian ladies. And of course, helping them part with their money. 1947 was a big year for Abe. He was charged with possession of a firearm, unlicensed, and released on entering a good behaviour bond of 2 years for £10. He also married girlfriend Doreen Kranz, a hairdresser that he had met in 1942. In 1948, he opened several Sydney pubs, some of which he placed under dummy names, where it was proven later on that he was purchasing alcohol legitimately through these pubs and then through his other businesses selling it at black market prices, making him a handsome profit. In 1949, Abe loses his dad Sam. The loss is felt terribly, and it was believed he wore a black tie for a year. He must have really admired and loved his parents. In 1953, the Roseville Club was shut down after being declared a disorderly house by the New South Wales Police Commissioner for disorderly conduct, meaning it could have been a brothel or somewhere vile acts take place, being that the patrons were public nuisances or had undesirable dealings there. What was Abe mixed up in now? He went from being a cunning young lad to now 30-something and an undesirable figure in society. In 1954, the Maxwell Royal Commission blackened his name, accusing him of scandals. It wasn't until 1956 that his businesses were part of a raid by police. There were some wild accusations against Abe. Some you wouldn't even believe, or maybe you would. But for the 50s, this was unheard of. Not since the atrocities of the Razor Gang was there such lewd activity going on in Sydney. Well, maybe there was, but it wasn't found out like this. Abe was in the thick of it. Abe was into some weird things, such as whipping one of the girls for the entertainment of the patrons. Yeah, I think that might be going a little far. These royal commissions were really tarnishing Abe's name. Something had to be done. He was constantly in the news, and not for good things. He had to make friends in high places to get his name out of disrepute and out of the papers. He was a businessman. He wasn't this dirty, filthy person they kept talking about as Mr. Sin. He had to make sure that these royal commissions stopped. His name couldn't be tarnished any further. He had businesses to run. He needed to align himself with the right people, at whatever cost it would be, paying the highest he could to make sure that he could make the most money that he could. Abe kept it in the family, going into business with older siblings Henry and Beryl, opening clubs under their names so that he couldn't be linked to them, sometimes opening it in his own name but not his real name, such as Abe Flack, or using his sister Beryl Flack in several dealings. They must have been able to get away with a lot, opening businesses in strange names. Or was he much like Lennie and the A-Team, being able to get passports or documents in other names so as they could legally look as though they were doing it, even though it was illegal? Friends in high places. These organised crime bosses knew how to get police commissioners and premiers to do what they wanted simply by flashing the cash. And they would make a lot of it and have to give a fair chunk of it away to politicians and police. It's that pull of money, you see, and why not take a chunk of it for himself? As we've said, he had a knack for this, but could he keep out of jail? Things at home with Doreen were going very well. They had their son, Aaron, born in March of 1949, before all of this craziness occurred. It must have been crazy for little Aaron to be brought up in a world where newspapers were talking about his father in not very nice terms. It is alleged that Doreen and Abe split for a year in 1956. Perhaps it all got too much for her for some time. But they were back together again, stronger than ever, as they would be together for the entirety of her life. As we will find out later on though, Abe wasn't always faithful to Doreen, and this could have been why they had their little split. It was friend Richard Gabriel Riley that helped Abe Saffron into connections with the police, as Riley had a brother who was a policeman, and the connection started from there, working its way up to the very top later on. Well, I hope you're enjoying these episodes. This is the first episode on Abe Saffron, and there will probably be 2 more parts to this, as there's so much to tell. There are some very interesting events to come, as well as some very tragic, kept secret for many years. So stay tuned for more on Abe Saffron. Don't forget to hit the like button if you're enjoying this, as well as subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so you're aware when we're posting part 2 and 3 of Mr. Sin, the King of the Cross, Abe Saffron.